Lately, I've been thinking about the difference between being clean and being sober and whether or not those words actually mean the same thing, especially because lately I've realized how much definitions can actually shape your identity. The words we use don't just describe our experiences, they often influence how we continue to interpret them. And sometimes we don't realize how much meaning we actually attach to the words we use until the meaning of that is challenged. This topic has been on my mind recently because someone told me that I wasn't actually sober, even though I haven't drank in over 500 days, if I smoked cannabis, even if I were to get a medical cannabis card for chronic pain. And that honestly really pissed me off because I didn't agree with that. I see myself as a sober person. I haven't drank in almost a year and a half. So telling me that I'm not actually sober made me feel really discredited and invalidated. I decided to get deep into figuring out the meaning between clean and sober and what it means, and I'm going to explain my thoughts. Because until recently, I had never actually examined where the word and meaning came from, so that's something that I did. And I wanted to figure out for myself if the understanding I had of the word was the only meaning, or is it more complex than that. So the word sober comes from the Latin word sobrius, which translates to not drunk. So that really made me think about how the meaning of words can evolve over time and add and lose meaning in other ways. And different groups interpret different words differently. And sometimes meanings expand a bit beyond their original intention. So I started wondering and looking into whether everyone is actually using the same definition when they use the word sober for themselves. Sometimes I feel like we just assume that shared language means a same understanding, but that is not necessarily the case. What I was told in AA, what the word sober means, which means no weed or anything, so that would mean I'm not actually sober, but nicotine is allowed, smoking a pack of diet cigarettes is allowed, but taking a few hits of a joint here and there isn't allowed. So that didn't really make sense to me, and that really bothered me. And I've also noticed that the word clean is also used to describe abstinence from substance. So someone can stop doing drugs and still drink, but they can still be defined and considered as clean, but they're not sober. So how come I can't be not clean, but I'm still sober? And so sober is often used to also describe clarity, stability, or being free from toxic patterns. And in my life and my experience, despite the fact that I smoke weed every here and there, I am still stable. I have a lot of clarity in a lot of situations, and I have freed myself from the toxic patterns that I have that were stemming from alcohol and my alcohol addiction. I don't walk into Alcoholics Anonymous because I have a weed problem. I walk into Alcoholics Anonymous, well, I did because I have had a problem with alcohol. The words clean and sober have been treated like they mean the exact same thing recently, at least in my experience. And I don't necessarily think that they do mean the same thing. And to tell someone they're not actually clean and they're not actually sober is, in my opinion, kind of invalidating. And I think that that difference starts to become more noticeable when medical situations become, especially when the reason for using something is related to health rather than recreation. So if it's prescribed by a doctor, then it's okay. If it's recreational, then it's not. So context can also really influence how behavior is interpreted. I can indulge the same amount, whether it's recreational or medical, that doesn't change my action, but that seems to change the whole outlook on the whole situation. So medical situations do add a bit of complexity because many treatments can affect the nervous system. And I personally have chronic pain, and that is one of the reasons why I choose to smoke weed. And there are many medications that affect mood, perception, sleep, anxiety, and pain, and many more things. And society generally doesn't consider someone not sober for following medical guidance. And health decisions are rarely a one-size-fits-all, and neither should recover. You know, if they say one thing at a time and that's okay, how come weed can't also be that one thing at a time? And intention is a really big thing. So here's the difference between using something compulsively to escape and using something intentionally to improve functioning or reduce suffering. Compulsion usually involves a loss of control, and intention involves awareness of boundaries. The relationship to that is really important and matters a lot. And I think that the relationship to something should be more important than the label that we just go and attach to it. Because labels can actually oversimplify much more complex patterns, and understanding that pattern can provide more information than the label alone. And I can respect the fact that some recovery programs define sobriety very specifically, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't mean that my understanding and my definition of that has to be the same thing. It just means that that recovery path isn't the path for me. And I need something that aligns with my understanding of sobriety based on both my lived experiences and my interpretation of the literal meaning of the word. Especially living with chronic pain, I think that health decisions sometimes require some nuance. I don't think that one universal definition necessarily fits every single person, because different people have different needs and different nervous systems, different health conditions, and different recovery paths. And flexibility is a really good way to support sustainability, because what works for one person doesn't have to work for the next person. And I think part of growth is being willing to actually examine the language that we use. Reevaluating beliefs can be part of development, and adjusting perspective doesn't necessarily mean rejecting everything. So another important factor to touch back on is that language influences your identity, and identity then influences behavior. So I think clarity in language can create clarity in how we actually see it, because the way that we describe ourselves will then influence our decision. And often your identity is something that evolves over time. And now this whole conversation I'm having, I don't see it as a final opinion, because I'm always open to adjust my thinking and take on new opinions and new things. But for right now, this is my opinion and this is what I stand by. And it is an ever evolving understanding. And I know that recovery is deeply personal, and it is not a cookie cutter one size fits all path. And I think honesty about what actually improves stability matters more than fitting perfectly into just one definition. Moral of the story, I view being sober as not being drunk. If you want to say California sober, that's still sober in my opinion. You know, I feel like there are so many worse things that I could be doing that I'm not doing. I'm not doing hard drugs or anything, but every once in a while I will partake in marijuana, and that shouldn't take away from the fact that I got over the addiction that was literally killing me, and that's alcohol. So I'm sober because I don't drink alcohol anymore, and that has made me a better person. So if you're still watching this, thank you so much for making it to the end. Let me know what other videos you want to see and what other thoughts of mine you would like to hear. Comment down below your opinion of being clean versus being sober, if you think there's a difference. I do really want to know everyone's different opinions. Like this video if it helped you in some way, or if you learned anything from it. And with that being said, I will see you in my next video.